Did you think the Commanders' minicamp was going to be calm? You're completely crazy. What's just happened in this first mandatory practice is absolutely devastating for some and historic for others. I have 3 explosive pieces of news that will completely change our outlook for the 2025 season. And when you hear the last one, you'll understand why this team might be completely different from anything we've seen over the last 2 decades. If that surprises you, wait until you hear this, because what comes next will leave you speechless. Remember when we all doubted if Luke McCaffrey could compete at this level? Let me tell you this. After years of seeing unfulfilled promises in this organization, after wasted draft picks like Josh Doctson, after eternally waiting for breakouts, that never came. We finally have a player turning potential into pure, devastating reality. This young man is literally defying all expectations in mandatory minicamp, and he's doing it in a way that reminds me of those magical moments when you finally see a player click. And you know what's most impressive about all this? He's doing it in a receiver room that now features Deebo Samuel Sr., one of the most versatile receivers in the NFL, Michael Gallup with all his Dallas experience, and Jalen Lane, who comes with sky-high expectations. That competition that many thought would sink him and send him to the practice squad is bringing out the best in him. But here's what really excites me. McCaffrey's route running is on another level compared to what we saw last year. When he was picked as the 100th draft pick in 2024, many critics said it was a risk because he had played very little as a receiver at Rice, coming more as a converted athlete than a natural receiver. But look at him now. I think what we're seeing here is a direct result of having Christian McCaffrey as a brother. Do you think it's a coincidence that Luke is taking off right now? I tell you no. When you have access to one of the best running backs in the NFL as a personal mentor, when you can call him any day and ask about footwork, about reading defenses, about the mindset needed to compete at the highest level, that makes an abysmal difference. And let's talk about this specific play against Marshon Lattimore, a cornerback who's been in 4 Pro Bowls, who has covered the NFC's best receivers for years, and McCaffrey beat him with such a perfect fake that Lattimore completely bit. That's not luck. That's preparation meeting opportunity. That's a player who's been studying film, working on his craft, and is ready to take the next step. The former Rice receiver is running routes with a precision we didn't see last year, but more importantly, he's running routes with confidence. That separation he's creating, that chemistry he's building with Jaden Daniels, is exactly what we need if we want our offense to be truly unstoppable. Because remember, Daniels needs reliable options, needs receivers who can win their matchups, and McCaffrey is proving he can be exactly that. But do you think McCaffrey has already secured his place on the roster? Do you think this is enough to guarantee he'll have a significant role? Because what comes next will make you rethink absolutely everything about our receivers' depth chart. But that's nothing compared to what's coming. Because if you thought our receiving corps was completely solid after the offseason acquisitions, what happened to Noah Brown will make you see reality in a completely different and potentially terrifying way. During a 7-on-7 exercise, in what was supposed to be a routine minicamp practice, Noah Brown went to the ground in a way that immediately made everyone in the facility concerned. It wasn't a hit. It wasn't contact. It was one of those moments where you know something went wrong before they even confirm it. And when they had to take him off on a stretcher, when they saw he couldn't put weight on that leg, that's when we knew this was serious. Did you see how he threw the helmet after they helped him off the field? That frustration he showed, that raw emotion, tells me everything I need to know about the gravity of this situation. Noah Brown is a veteran. He's been in this league for 8 years. He's dealt with injuries before. For a player of his experience, to show that level of frustration, to throw equipment like that, this has to be devastating for him personally. Now let me ask you this. Remember that Hail Mary against Chicago? Remember that moment that kept us alive in the playoffs? That gave us that victory nobody expected? Noah Brown was the one who caught that historic ball. In a moment where we needed magic, where we needed someone to make the impossible catch, there was Brown doing what he does best, being reliable when it matters most. 35 receptions, 453 yards last year may not be spectacular numbers that will appear on SportsCenter, but this man has been absolutely reliable when we've needed him the most. That touchdown against Chicago wasn't just a touchdown. It was the moment that defined our entire playoff run. Without that catch, there's no playoff victory, no magical season, no NFC Championship game. And here's what really worries me about this injury. Brown is not just a receiver, he's a leader in that room. The Cowboys developed him for 6 years. He learned from some of the best coaches and players in the league. Houston had him for a year, where he continued developing his craft. And we were just starting to see his true value as part of this offense. I believe Brown's importance goes far beyond the stats that appear in the box score. Dan Quinn trusts him to make the right reads, to be in the right place at the right time. Jaden Daniels has developed real chemistry with him. That kind of connection you can't just replace overnight. And now we potentially lose him, just when we need more depth, just when we needed every weapon available. And do you know why this is absolutely critical? Because with the season starting against the Giants on September 7th, in an NFC East loaded with talent, we cannot afford to lose key pieces due to avoidable practice injuries. Every game in our division will be a battle. Every possession will matter. And losing a reliable target like Brown could be the difference between making the playoffs again or watching from home. But think about the ripple effects here. If Brown is out for extended time, that means more pressure on Terry McLaurin to be the guy. That means more opportunities for McCaffrey, sure, but also means less depth if someone else gets hurt. That means having to potentially rely on unproven rookies or players who haven't had enough time to develop chemistry with Daniel. And Dan Quinn now has to adjust his offensive game plans. Has to figure out how to replace not just Brown's production, but also his leadership and experience in crucial moments. Because Brown isn't the type of player who gets all the headlines, but he's the type that wins games when it matters most. But here comes the really crazy part of all this. Because while we're dealing with potentially losing Brown, another story is developing that could completely change everything about our defense. Or when you thought we were done, when you thought you'd heard enough drama for one day, Marshon Lattimore just reminded us why Adam Peters paid what he paid for him. And he did it in a way that has everyone in Ashburn completely re-evaluating what this defense can become. After a 2024 season where everyone, and when I say everyone, including me, questioned if this acquisition had been a complete disaster, Lattimore came out to practice and showed that the player we knew, that shutdown corner, who terrorized NFC South receivers for years, is still there and is hungry to prove that the doubters were wrong. Do you think Dan Quinn was nervous before this practice? I guarantee you that he was. Do you think Adam Peters wasn't watching every single rep Lattimore took? Of course he was. Because this trade, this move that cost us significant draft capital, needed to work out, or it was going to be another black mark on a franchise that has made too many questionable decisions in recent years. Because let's be brutally honest here, the trade we made with New Orleans looked like a complete disaster for most of last season. A 4-time Pro Bowl cornerback who couldn't stay healthy, who came limited from day one, who could never shake off that hamstring injury that kept him from being the player we traded for. Week after week watching him struggle, watching him get beaten on plays the old Lattimore would have dominated, watching our defense suffer because we didn't have the lockdown corner we thought we were getting. But do you know what happened yesterday on that practice field? Lattimore moved like the shutdown corner that he was in his best days with the Saints. That explosion out of his breaks, that fluid hip movement that allows him to stay step for step with elite receivers, that anticipation that separates good corners from great ones. It was all there. And let's talk specifics here, because details matter. Joe Witt Jr., our defensive coordinator, had been coaching corners in Green Bay. He knows what elite coverage looks like. For him to see Lattimore moving without limitations, to see him attacking drills with the intensity we hadn't seen since he arrived, that's huge validation that this player is finally healthy. I believe. This is the most important news of the entire minicamp. And here's why. Our secondary defense depends completely on Marshon returning to being elite. Joe Witt Jr. designed his entire defensive scheme around having a cornerback who can cover one-on-one, who can take away the opponent's best receiver, who can allow us to put extra help elsewhere. Without that, we're vulnerable against every team on our schedule, but especially against the Cowboys with CeeDee Lamb, Eagles with A.J. Brown, and Giants with their receiving corps. And you know what was the most impressive about everything that happened? That Luke McCaffrey managed to beat him on a play with a perfect fake. But instead of being frustrated or showing rust, Lattimore showed the explosiveness and quick twitch movements that we hadn't seen since he arrived in Washington. That speed, that agility, those instincts that made him one of the best corners in the league are back. And they're back in full force. But let's talk about what this means for our entire defensive identity. With Lattimore healthy and playing, at an elite level, suddenly our entire secondary looks different. Suddenly, Benjamin St-Juste doesn't have to cover the opponent's best receiver every week. Suddenly, we can be more aggressive with our safety play because we know we have lockdown coverage on one side. And think about this. Lattimore at his best isn't just about the stats, although those interceptions and pass breakups certainly matter. It's about changing how offensive coordinators have to approach game planning against us. When you have a corner who can completely take away half the field, who can make quarterbacks hesitant to even look toward his side, that changes everything about how an offense operates. The impact goes beyond just coverage too. When receivers know they're going against a corner who can press them at the line, who can run step for step with them downfield, who has the ball skills to make them pay for any mistake, that affects their confidence, their route running, their entire approach to the game. Now let me ask you, do you believe Lattimore can maintain this level throughout the entire season? Because if he can, and if our offense continues developing as we expect with Daniels taking next steps, with McCaffrey emerging as a real threat, with our running game being as physical as it was last year, this team has all the tools to not only repeat last year's campaign, but to go further than we've gone in decades. But also think about the pressure here. Lattimore is in the last year of his contract. This is his opportunity to prove that he deserves another big deal, that last year's injuries were an aberration, not the beginning of a decline. Every snap he takes this season will be evaluated. Every play will matter for his future, both with Washington and in the league. Let's recap everything that just happened, because these three stories aren't just isolated incidents. They're interconnected pieces that are going to define our entire 2025 season. McCaffrey taking off in spectacular fashion, Brown potentially being lost to injury at the worst possible time, Lattimore resurrected, and looking like the player we thought we were getting. These three pieces of news show us that this minicamp is not just preparation, it's a declaration of intentions. It's our team showing that we're not satisfied with just making the NFC Championship, that we want more, that we're willing to do whatever it takes to get over that final hump. But let's be real about what each of these stories means for our realistic expectations. McCaffrey breaking out could give us the depth at receiver we didn't know we had, could provide Jaden Daniels with another reliable target, could make our offense even more unpredictable than it was last year. But can he maintain this level when the pads come on? Can he do it against starting defenses in real games? Brown's injury, meanwhile, is potentially devastating because it affects our depth at a position where injuries happen frequently. Receivers get hurt, they get banged up, they deal with nagging issues throughout long seasons. Losing someone with Brown's experience and reliability could force us to rely on unproven players in crucial moments, and Lattimore looking healthy is potentially the most important development because it could transform our entire defensive identity. But will his hamstring hold up during a full season? Can he handle the physical demands of covering elite receivers twice a week for 4 months? Do you think Noah Brown will be ready by September? Or is this injury going to linger and affect him throughout the season? Can Luke McCaffrey really become our reliable WR2? Or is this just minicamp heroics that won't translate to real games? And is Marshon Lattimore finally going to justify that trade and give us the shutdown coverage we've been missing? Leave your predictions in the comments, because I guarantee tomorrow we'll have more explosive news from this minicamp. This is just the beginning of what promises to be the most important offseason in franchise history. Like, if you believe Lattimore is going to be our best defensive back this season, subscribe. If you think McCaffrey will surprise absolutely everyone with his production, and comment which of these three stories you think will have the most impact on our 2025 season. Because this burgundy and gold community is a family, And families like ours don't miss a play of what's happening in Ashburn. Join us, be part of this passion that unites us as Commanders fans, and don't miss any of the news that's going to define our path, not just to the playoffs, but to that Super Bowl we've been dreaming about for decades. And remember, hail to the Commanders.